as artists, we are very familiar with rejections. To find a place to show the work, it's not an easy thing. And I too will admit that there are those moments of disappointment. And, and our questioning to say, okay, all this hard work, I practice my art like my job. I'm here not just 5 days a week, sometimes more. And then even when I'm not here, I'm still working. And, in my head, I'm working. I'm thinking about it, doing something about it, kind of stuff. So the key to it, how do you deal with that, with those moments of disappointment and self-doubt? The magic is to just remind yourself, why do you paint? And I do the same thing. Either I come in here or I just sit down and say, okay, why do I paint? I paint because I have to paint. So does it matter whether somebody saw it today or during my lifetime or never will? It doesn't. And then you can just relax and be the artist you want to be. It's yes, there are practical issues with it, and I fully understand and appreciate that. But when we choose to be artists, we've already signed up for it. I was born in Bangladesh, in a place called Chattogram, and it is on the coast of Bay of Bengal. It was part of Pakistan. And then when in 1971, it became Bangladesh. It's now Bangladesh. I left Bangladesh when I was 17 years old to go to school in Moscow, Russia. And that was because there was nowhere else we could go. And our schools and colleges and universities were destroyed. Worse than that, the intelligentsia was murdered. And so this was after a genocide. So that is when I left Bangladesh and never really returned. And I studied economics in Moscow State University. And after that, we came to United States in 1982. While I was in Moscow, that is when I really had the great opportunity to visit world-class museums, like Tretyakovsky Art Gallery, St. Petersburg, which used to be Leningrad at that time, the Hermitage there, and really saw, because before that, growing up in Bangladesh, we could only see reproductions. So to be able to stand in front of an original and see was an amazing thing. However, looking at art or looking at things that inspire you, mostly art, I will say, I think that is, looking at anything is perhaps the most fundamental skill an artist can have. I have to say that it goes back to my mother. She would point out the shapes of flowers, the colors. She would point out the color of the sky and the different shades of gray during the monsoons. But nature always has an influence on us, and seeing in that particular way. And then there were other teachers in my life, mostly painters. And I knew some of the local painters when I was growing up. And I loved to paint as a child. And my father did notice that. But he was a very practical man and ambitious for his daughters. And he believed that we should have independent careers and be able to support ourselves, which growing up with him, I never thought to be a real radical idea. But when I look back now, especially there, it was a tremendously radical concept. It seems like it still is radical, fairly radical, even here. And so my dad said to me that, you do beautiful work, but you should continue to do that, but don't move away from building a career that will support you. And that is why I went into science and then mathematics and economics at the end when I went to Moscow. And so when in 1982 I came to United States, we had a very young child, and the focus was that, okay, how do we provide for her education and all that. So the focus was there, and for very practical reasons, I decided that I needed to, work. To pursue a career in art was not thinkable at that time at all. And so I retrained in computer science and worked, actually after that my career was in information technology. And I worked in corporate America for many years, 17 years, far too long probably. And, had a fairly successful, I would say a very successful career, and did well there. But I always had the desire and the practice of art. This I fell in totally in love with, and not just in love with. I think it became a very integral part of my survival. Was during this past year when I truly understood nature as shelter, how it sustains you. All this time I always thought that, it is the people interaction, it is the energy of cities, the museums, galleries, the travels everywhere. But all that, we hit a pause. And this pause is where I went back to my childhood, place of stopping to look, to see and feel. I have lived in many places, called many places my home. Some are no longer accessible, and some still are, like, the country where I was born. I still have a very strong heart line because my mother still lives there. And so when I think of certain places or think of ideas like what is home, that by itself is a very complicated thing for me, because I have, like I said, that I have had many homes, many places where I felt very much at home. So I call those places also my home. At the same time, I understand that, and here I am in Maine for how many years? Since 1993. And yet, is this my home? That remains a question. And so my home has become a very abstract concept that remains inside me. I take it with, I'm a nomad who carries the home in my heart, and it just moves with me. So, and part of that home is memory, and the memories of different places. And with this particular series, what happened is, if I can speak of the white set, the gardenias grew outside in the garden, and I can still remember the fragrance. And so I thought, can I remember the real color of the gardenia flower? And that is how I started trying to find the color. And like memory is never perfect, mine isn't either. And I can't quite tell what exact color was it. So this is more of the search for that memory and to give it shape. My whole idea of all my paintings is how you minimize the noise. How do you take away the distraction so that you can try and come to the purity of color or form? to find that common element that will transcend language barriers. That's my hope. Whether it happens, it's open. That's an open question. But that is the goal. And that is why I try to reduce and bring it to the elements that's just enough to show that you cannot minimize anymore, and you leave it there.